It is the sixth and final model introduced in the 2025 Godzilla collaboration with Meteorot S, sporting the likeness of the iconic Destroyer and cosmic horror of the stars. It is GZL05 Destro Ender, with a kit of double fire shot, minus chain, hyper survivor, biped legs, and the leg ability of Combustion, which is a brand new leg ability that, when afflicted by a fire effect damage over time ailment, restores the HP lost by the effect when triggered, and also buffs leg stats up to 5 times. Now, over the course of this Godzilla collaboration, we have seen a number of the iconic Godzilla kaijus and rivals to the Big G himself, and of course, a cosmic horror from the cosmos themselves is most certainly no exception to this rule either, especially with the introduction of Space Godzilla as well to really spice things up with a gravity-oriented kind of punish that it brings to the table. Destro Ender is most certainly no exception either. Double Fire Shot on the head part is a brand new shooting skill being introduced into the game, which, simply explained, behaves very similarly, almost identically, to Godzilla Double Melt Shot. And explained, when attacking the target, it applies a stack of fire to self, but also applies not one, but 2 stacks of fire DOT on the target. So this means if you weren't really dealing too much with DOTs to start melting the target, this is going to make it extremely easy for you to shred armor passively and make it a whole lot easier for not just Destro Ender, but basically anyone else who's on his team to break a lot of parts at once, as it reduces all HP down to 1. Now, it is also worth noting, though, because I did not mention this on Godzilla, but you did read this correctly. It applies 2 stacks to the target. So again, they'll be eating 2 DOT effects the entire time while you're only eating 1. And if you're using Destroyer as a pure set with Combustion, oh well, you're getting an HP effect restored based on what you lost anyway. Minus Chain on the right arm is a melee attribute skill that gets a very unique damage condition, as it checks for very specific types of modifiers to get those damage bonuses. Simply explained, Minus Chain, when attacking the target, checks it for the number of negative ailments or debuffs applied to self. So that means for every debuff it applies, it boosts the damage by times 1.5. So for every debuff, that's 1.5 on top of that, making it a grand total of almost times 4 damage for a fully afflicted target. And, when you look at that, Double Fire Shot inflicting 2 stacks already makes it a triple damage bonus on top of that, just based on what it brings to the team. And with the base power of 1361, that's already going to be extremely powerful and just as deadly once it does officially hit the scene. This also serves as a very solid contrast to Godzilla minus attack, which actually checks the user for ailments instead of the target. Hyper Survivor on the left arm is another very unique ailment skill that's been in the game for a rather hot minute now. But simply explained, Survivor is a negative ailment that, when applied, prevents the target from being able to receive any healing actions at all. This includes anything from stat cleanse to HP restoration to part restoration, or even if it's applied to a healer, that makes the healer effectively null and void for the entirety of the fight, period. And with it being the hyper variant, means that you also be getting a higher base damage on top of that, a very solid 1605, and piercing in addition, at the cost, of course, that you cannot dodge or defend on your cooldown. But this actually applies really nicely with Double Fire Shot as a very synergetic kit for Destro Ender, as between both his head and his left arm, that's 3 negative ailments that Destro Ender can apply on its own for a times 4.5 actually, so I actually miscalculated, 4.5 damage bonus as long as you can apply all 3 of those and then use Minus Chain for some really big numbers of punish damage. Biped legs means that Destro Ender will have relatively solid coverage across all terrains fairly well, and of course, following with the same pattern we've had through almost every model of this collab being triple heavy, means it's a very solid leg all around. A base mobility of 892 is really nice as well, as it means he's not going to have any trouble in the speed department before any modifiers such as terrain or meta rudder have to be applied in. He's going to be pretty solid in the speed department. An evade of 1507 is really nice too, as it means he can dodge or graze fairly well as long as he doesn't have a no dodge penalty on a cooldown. and a melee resist of 1223 and a shoot of 1278, almost 1300, means it's a very solid and well-rounded biped leg on top of that. So he can fight both at range and up close and personal, and not really see a drop in his performance overall. As far as armor is concerned, he's also pretty healthy in that department too, with a head armor of just under 4,200, arms at just over 39, almost 4,000 each, and legs over 4,000, means that pairing high armor with very solid damage reduction means it's going to be pretty tough to take this cosmic horror down the longer he's allowed to remain on the field. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I honestly have to rate Destro Ender about the same grade I gave to Godzilla Ragna as well, at a 7 out of 10. Much like Godzilla Ragna does, the models are just about identical in how they behave, so if you've used one, you more or less have used the other to a very solid ability and advantage. The difference is that Destro Ender focuses more on how many ailments that he can inflict on the target, where Godzilla Ragna instead focuses on how many he can inflict on himself. However, as far as Destro Ender is concerned though, Combustion does synergize extremely well with double fire shot, or basically anything that applies a fire effect to self, as anytime that you receive the DOT effect, guess what? You get it back as HP, and you get a leg stat bonus on top of that up to 5 times. So anything such as double fire shot, or flame, or anything else of the like, those are all very powerful parts to use with this. And Minus Chain and Hyper Survivor also synergize extremely well with double fire shot for some very big damage like I mentioned. At the cost, however, it is worth noting that he is triple heavy, so anyone bringing heavy punish is definitely going to be making sure that he feels the pain, and if anyone brings Stat Cleanse to the table, if they can apply it before he can use Hyper Survivor, they can effectively render him almost null and void extremely easily. As mixed parts, I do have to rate him just a little bit lower at a 6 out of 10, the same manner I graded Godzilla Ragna, because again, all of these parts are actually pretty solid unto themselves, but some of them kind of require you to use them with other similar parts or like parts in order to capitalize on it. Minus Chain, for instance, is probably going to be the most versatile here, as it does mean that it doesn't check the self, but the target for the number of ailments applied. Those can include Flash, Bug, Fire, Melt, Deathlock, Wave, Fence, Evade Seal, or anything else the like. The more negative symptoms that the target has, the more powerful Minus Chain can be. Hyper Survivor you probably won't see too much of in my honest opinion, because you have to be able to successfully outrun the healer in order to make use of this. Otherwise, if they use Stat Cleanse before you, that's kind of the end of it. However, matching double fire shot with Combustion or anything that applies a fire DOT to self will be very nice though between those head and legs, so you can definitely capitalize on getting some leg stats and some restored HP to guarantee you don't lose anything as long as you remain on fire.